Welcome to the 18-plus horror podcast. Stories too dark for the daylight. If you're brave enough, like and subscribe before it finds you.
Welcome to 18-plus horror podcast. Tonight, we delve into the chilling tale of the Jonestown Massacre, a tragedy so horrifying it continues to send shivers down the spine decades later. November 18, 1978, a date etched in infamy. Over 900 members of the People's Temple, led by the charismatic yet sinister Jim Jones, perished in a mass suicide murder. Picture this. A remote jungle settlement in Guyana, hundreds of bodies scattered around vats of cyanide-laced flavor aid, a scene of unimaginable despair. What drove so many to willingly end their lives? Was it blind faith, coercion, or something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface? Tonight, we dissect the timeline, the motives, and the eerie coincidences surrounding this horrific event. We'll examine witness accounts, declassified documents, and the chilling audio recordings of Jones's final sermon, the so-called death tape. Join us as we descend into the heart of darkness and attempt to unravel the mystery behind the Jonestown Massacre.
The Jonestown Massacre wasn't just a mass suicide. It was a meticulously orchestrated tragedy, a testament to the power of manipulation and the chilling grip of a cult leader. Jones, a self-proclaimed messiah, had cultivated an environment of fear and absolute obedience within his people's temple. He preyed on the vulnerable, promising them salvation and a utopian community far from the evils of the world. But paradise soon turned into a prison. Reports of physical and psychological abuse emerged, painting a picture of a community trapped in a web of fear. Escape attempts were met with brutal consequences, and dissent was swiftly silenced. The move to Jonestown, Guyana, was presented as a fresh start, a chance to build a socialist paradise. But in reality, it was a strategic move to isolate his followers and consolidate his power. The seeds of the massacre were sown long before the flavor aid was mixed. It was a slow, calculated descent into madness, orchestrated by a man who held the lives of his followers in his hands.
The events leading up to the massacre are a cascade of disturbing red flags. Defectors began speaking out about Jones's increasingly erratic behavior, his paranoia, and his obsession with revolutionary suicide. He conducted regular white nights rehearsals for mass suicide, where followers were made to drink what they believed was poison, only to be told later it was a test of their loyalty. These drills desensitized them to the idea of death and instilled a chilling obedience. Congressman Leo Ryan's visit to Jonestown in November 1978 was meant to investigate these allegations, but it proved to be the catalyst for the final act. Ryan's arrival sparked a wave of hope among some residents who saw an opportunity to escape. As Ryan and his entourage prepared to leave, they were ambushed by Jones's security guards, a tragic event captured in grainy news footage. 5 people, including Ryan, were killed. Back in Jonestown, with his world crumbling around him, Jones initiated the final horrific act of his twisted play.
The death tape, a chilling audio recording of Jones's final sermon, provides a harrowing glimpse into the final moments at Jonestown. His voice, a blend of calm authority and desperate pleading, urged his followers to embrace revolutionary suicide as an act of defiance against the outside world. He spoke of a conspiracy against them, claiming that they would be tortured and persecuted if they remained alive. Amidst the cries of children and the sobs of adults, the sounds of cyanide being administered are audible, a horrifying soundtrack to a mass tragedy. While some may have willingly participated, many, especially the children, were forcibly given the poisoned drink. The sheer scale of the event, the number of innocent lives lost, is incomprehensible. Even decades later, the Jonestown Massacre remains a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the fragility of belief, and the devastating consequences of blind obedience. The echoes of Jones's voice, captured on that chilling tape, continue to haunt us, a testament to the enduring darkness of human nature.
Welcome back to 18-plus Horror Podcast. In this episode, we delve into the chilling events of November 18, 1978, in Jonestown, Guyana, a remote settlement that became the site of the largest single loss of American civilian life in a deliberate act prior to 9/11. Over 900 members of the People's Temple, led by the charismatic yet deeply disturbed Jim Jones, perished in a mass suicide murder by cyanide-laced flavor aid. The sheer scale of the tragedy, coupled with the bizarre circumstances surrounding it, continues to fascinate and horrify. We're sifting through declassified documents, survivor testimonies, and audio recordings from that fateful day to piece together a narrative of what transpired in that isolated jungle commune. We aim to understand how such a tragedy could unfold, and the darkness that can fester within seemingly utopian communities.
Jonestown, a settlement carved out of the Guyanese jungle, was meant to be a socialist paradise, a sanctuary from the perceived evils of American society. But beneath the veneer of utopia lay a sinister reality. Jones, a self-proclaimed prophet, held absolute power over his followers, manipulating them with a mix of religious fervor, fear, and promises of a better life. He orchestrated public healings, preached about impending apocalyptic doom, and instilled in his followers an unwavering loyalty. He gradually tightened his grip, isolating them from the outside world and employing increasingly brutal methods of control, including public beatings and sleep deprivation. By the time Congressman Leo Ryan arrived in Jonestown to investigate allegations of abuse, the community had transformed into a virtual prison camp. The congressman's visit would prove to be a catalyst for the horrific climax of the Jonestown saga.
Ryan's visit, initially intended to assess the conditions in Jonestown and address concerns raised by family members back in the States, quickly turned into a desperate escape attempt. Several temple members, disillusioned with Jones's increasingly paranoid and tyrannical rule, expressed their desire to leave with the congressman. As Ryan's delegation prepared to depart from the nearby Port Kaituma airstrip, they were ambushed by Jones's armed guards. 5 people, including Congressman Ryan, were murdered in the attack. This act of violence sealed the fate of Jonestown. Back in the settlement, Jones, realizing the repercussions of the attack, rallied his followers, urging them to participate in what he called revolutionary suicide. He presented cyanide-laced flavor aid as a means to escape the inevitable persecution and torment he claimed awaited them at the hands of the outside world.
The audio recording of Jones's final speech, known as the death tape, paints a chilling portrait of manipulation, fear, and desperation. His voice, calm yet laced with an unsettling authority, exhorts his followers to drink the poison, particularly the children. The cries and protests of dissenters are audible amidst Jones's chilling pronouncements, interspersed with the sounds of hundreds of people dying. While some may argue about the extent to which coercion played a role, the scene depicted in the tape is undeniably horrifying. The tape serves as a grim testament to the power of cult leaders and the tragic consequences of blind obedience. It's a crucial piece of evidence in understanding the final, terrifying hours of Jonestown. It also raises disturbing questions about the psychology of cults and the vulnerability of individuals seeking belonging and meaning in the face of societal pressures.
The initial reports painted a picture of mass suicide, a desperate act by a community under siege. But the deeper you dig into the Jonestown story, the more that narrative crumbles. Take, for instance, the timeline leading up to November 18, 1978. Several accounts, primarily from defectors and those who managed to escape the massacre, describe a palpable shift in the atmosphere of Jonestown in the weeks prior. There's talk of intensified white nights, rehearsals for revolutionary suicide, where Jones would have followers drink what they believed was poison, only to later reveal it was a test of loyalty. These exercises became increasingly frequent, blurring the lines between a drill and the real thing. This psychological conditioning, combined with Jones's escalating paranoia and messianic delusions, created an environment ripe for tragedy. It's like the air itself grew heavy, thick with a sense of impending doom.
And it wasn't just the psychological manipulation, there were practical, observable changes too. Reports indicate that armed guards were more prevalent, patrolling the perimeter and restricting movement within Jonestown. Communication with the outside world became increasingly difficult, with letters and phone calls being heavily monitored. Family members back home began to receive disturbing, often incoherent messages from their loved ones in Guyana. Some described a growing sense of unease, a feeling that something was terribly wrong, though they couldn't articulate exactly what. Others received desperate pleas for help, coded messages hinting at a desire to escape. These fragmented pieces of information, combined with the escalating paranoia within the compound, paint a picture of a community spiraling towards a horrific climax. Something sinister was festering beneath the surface. hidden behind Jones's charismatic facade.
One particularly unsettling detail, often overlooked, is the number of unexplained deaths and disappearances in the months leading up to the massacre. Several residents of Jonestown perished under suspicious circumstances, often attributed to vague illnesses or accidents. These deaths were rarely investigated, and bodies were quickly cremated, raising questions about what was really happening. Were these early victims of Jones's paranoia, individuals who questioned his authority or expressed a desire to leave, or were they simply unfortunate casualties of the harsh conditions in the jungle settlement? The lack of transparency surrounding these deaths adds another layer of unease to the already disturbing narrative. It's as though the massacre itself was preceded by a series of smaller, more insidious tragedies, each one pushing the community further down a dark path.
The story of Deborah Layton, the temple's finance secretary, stands out as a chilling example of how things began to unravel. Just weeks before the massacre, Layton defected and delivered a detailed affidavit to Congressman Leo Ryan, outlining Jones's increasing paranoia, his stockpile of weapons, and his plans for, quote, revolutionary suicide. Her testimony provided a stark warning of the imminent danger facing the residents of Jonestown, but tragically, it wasn't enough to prevent the horrific events that followed. Layton's account, combined with the growing number of disturbing reports filtering out of Jonestown, painted a picture of a cult leader losing his grip on reality, a community held captive by fear, and a tragedy waiting to happen. It's a chilling reminder of the power of manipulation and the devastating consequences of unchecked power.
The sheer scale of it is what gets me, Sarah. 918 people. Men, women, children. All willingly drinking cyanide-laced Flavor-Aid, at least according to the official narrative. It's presented as this mass suicide orchestrated by Jim Jones, this charismatic, manipulative cult leader. But the deeper you dig into the Jonestown story, the more unsettling the details become. There are accounts of armed guards patrolling the perimeter, preventing anyone from leaving. Witness testimonies from defectors speak of systematic abuse, both physical and psychological. Jones held absolute power, controlling every aspect of their lives, from their diet to their thoughts. So, while the official line is mass suicide, it's hard not to consider the possibility of mass murder, coerced under extreme duress. And then there's the audio tape. The death tape, they call it. The chilling recording of Jones urging his followers to drink the poison, interspersed with the cries of children and the moans of the dying. It's almost unbearable to listen to.
It's difficult to comprehend, Mark. The level of psychological control Jones exerted over his followers is almost beyond belief. He fostered this atmosphere of paranoia and fear, constantly reminding them of the supposed enemies lurking outside Jonestown, waiting to persecute them. He convinced them that death was preferable to the horrors they would face if they left. He even conducted regular white nights, simulated suicide drills, where members would drink a liquid they were told was poison. This not only desensitized them to the idea of death, but also served as a powerful tool of coercion. Those who hesitated or expressed doubts would be singled out, publicly shamed and threatened. It was a constant, insidious erosion of their free will, a slow, methodical breaking down of their individual identities, until they were nothing more than extensions of Jones's will. It makes you question the very nature of free will itself, doesn't it? How far can someone be pushed, manipulated, before they're no longer capable of making their own choices?
And what about the reports of those who didn't willingly participate? The eyewitness accounts of people being injected with the poison against their will. The bodies found with puncture wounds, suggesting they were forcibly administered the cyanide. These stories are often brushed aside as the unreliable ramblings of traumatized survivors. But are they really? Or are they pieces of a much darker, more disturbing puzzle? The sheer number of children who died that day, it's just... I keep coming back to the motive, Sarah. What could possibly drive a person to orchestrate the deaths of almost 1,000 people, including hundreds of children? Was it madness? A twisted messianic complex? Or something even more sinister?
The official narrative focuses on Jones' paranoia and his fear of losing control, painting him as a megalomaniac driven to a final, desperate act of self-destruction. But that explanation doesn't fully account for the sheer brutality and premeditation of the event. There are whispered theories, of course, darker whispers, that suggest Jonestown wasn't just a cult, but something far more occult. Rumors of ritualistic practices, of human sacrifice. These theories are often dismissed as sensationalist speculation, but when you consider the sheer scale of the deaths, the deliberate nature of the act, it's hard not to at least entertain the possibility that something more sinister was at play. Something beyond the realm of rational comprehension. And that's what truly terrifies me, Mark. The possibility that we'll never truly understand the horrors of Jonestown, that it will forever remain shrouded in mystery and speculation.
The sheer scale of it is what truly chills me. Over 900 people, including more than 300 children, dead in a remote jungle settlement. Cyanide poisoning, primarily. The images from Jonestown are seared into my memory. Bodies strewn across the pavilion, discarded cups and syringes scattered amongst them. The audio recordings recovered from the scene are even more disturbing. You can hear Jim Jones's voice, calm and measured, directing his followers to drink the flavor aid laced with cyanide. He calls it revolutionary suicide. He speaks of escaping the perceived threats from the outside world, the supposed enemies closing in. But beneath the surface, you can detect a current of coercion, of undeniable control. It's not just blind faith, it's something far more sinister, something that strips these people of their free will, their very humanity. What kind of power did Jones wield to orchestrate such a horrific event?
It's a chilling example of the persuasive power of a cult leader. Jones cultivated an environment of absolute dependency. He isolated his followers from their families and friends, controlling every aspect of their lives. He positioned himself as a messiah figure, promising salvation and a utopian existence within Jonestown. He implemented public punishments and suicide drills to instill fear and obedience. But beyond the psychological manipulation, there's a darker element, a more unsettling aspect to the story. Some survivors spoke of bizarre rituals and ceremonies, of Jones claiming supernatural abilities. Whether these were simply tools to maintain control or something more occult remains a subject of debate. The fact that so many people willingly or seemingly willingly participated in their own deaths is perhaps the most horrifying aspect of the entire tragedy. It speaks to a profound vulnerability, a desperation that Jones expertly exploited.
The testimonies of those who escaped paint a grim picture of the final hours. They describe the chaos and confusion as the poison began to take hold, parents administering the deadly concoction to their own children. Screams and cries echoing through the settlement, slowly fading into an eerie silence. The few who managed to flee into the surrounding jungle faced an arduous and perilous journey to safety. They carried with them the horrific memories, the trauma of witnessing such an unimaginable event. Even today, decades later, the questions surrounding Jonestown persist. Was it mass suicide, or was it mass murder? Was Jones solely responsible, or were there other forces at play? The jungle holds its secrets close, whispering tales of a horror that continues to haunt us.
The details surrounding the Congressman Ryan's visit and subsequent murder add another layer of complexity. Ryan went to Jonestown to investigate claims of human rights abuses. He initially seemed convinced that everything was in order, but as more residents expressed their desire to leave with him, the situation became tense. On the airstrip, as Ryan's delegation was preparing to depart, they were ambushed by Jones's security guards. 5 people, including Ryan, were killed. This act of violence shattered any remaining illusion of Jonestown as a peaceful community and sealed the fate of its inhabitants. Jones knew that the outside world would intervene. His paranoia, fueled by his own twisted ideology, pushed him over the edge, leading to the final, horrific act of the Jonestown tragedy. The massacre serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of blind faith, the seductive power of manipulation, and the devastating consequences of unchecked power.
The truth about Jonestown, if you can even call it that, is far more disturbing than the official narrative. We've discussed the sheer scale of the event, the 900+ lives lost, the cyanide-laced flavor aid. But the underlying current of psychological manipulation and spiritual tyranny is what truly chills me. Jim Jones cultivated an environment of absolute dependence. He fostered paranoia, convincing his followers that the outside world was hostile, that only he could protect them. He meticulously broke down their individuality, their critical thinking, until they were mere extensions of his will. This wasn't just a mass suicide. It was a mass murder orchestrated by a man who had become a god in the eyes of his flock. And the more you delve into the specifics, the more unsettling it becomes. Reports of mock suicide drills, public beatings, and systematic sexual abuse paint a picture of a community living in constant fear, a fear that ultimately led them to their demise.
It's difficult to comprehend the level of control Jones held. Survivors' testimonies speak of a gradual escalation of his power. Initially, he presented himself as a charismatic healer, a champion of the oppressed. He preached racial equality and social justice, attracting a diverse following of vulnerable individuals seeking belonging and purpose. But over time, the message warped, becoming increasingly apocalyptic and paranoid. He introduced the White Nights, rehearsals for revolutionary suicide, initially presented as tests of loyalty. These evolved from symbolic acts to terrifyingly real simulations, conditioning his followers to accept death as an inevitability, even a liberation. The layers of psychological manipulation are staggering, almost impossible to untangle even decades later. What started as a utopian dream devolved into a nightmare from which there was no escape.
And there's a darker layer to this, something often whispered about but rarely explored in depth. Several former members spoke of Jones' fascination with the occult, with dark rituals and practices meant to solidify his power. There are accounts of animal sacrifices, spirit channeling, and even darker ceremonies involving human remains. While these claims are difficult to verify concretely, they add another dimension of horror to the Jonestown narrative. Did Jones believe he possessed supernatural powers? Was he using these rituals to further control his followers, to bind them to him in some twisted spiritual pact? It's a chilling thought, and one that opens the door to a deeper, more unsettling understanding of the events that unfolded in that remote Guyanese settlement.
These whispered accounts add a truly unsettling layer to the tragedy. Imagine the atmosphere of fear and paranoia already pervasive in Jonestown, amplified by these alleged occult practices. The feeling of being trapped, not just physically but spiritually, must have been overwhelming. These rituals, whether real or perceived, would have further solidified Jones's godlike status in the minds of his followers, making descent unthinkable, escape impossible. It reinforces the sense that Jonestown wasn't simply a community gone wrong, but something far more sinister, a place where the lines between faith, fear, and madness became irrevocably blurred. This wasn't just Kool-Aid. It was a cocktail of manipulation, paranoia, and perhaps something far darker.
It's hard to fathom the sheer scale of the tragedy. 909 lives lost, including over 300 children. The official narrative points to a mass suicide orchestrated by Jim Jones. But the more you dig, the more unsettling it becomes. There are whispers of dissent, of people being forced to drink the Flavor Aid, a horrifying echo of Jones's earlier suicide drills. Some witnesses who managed to escape claimed armed guards patrolled the pavilion, preventing anyone from leaving. Were these truly acts of free will, or a meticulously planned act of mass murder disguised as revolutionary suicide? The sheer number of deaths, the frantic last-minute pleas recorded on the infamous death tape, the accounts of armed guards, it all paints a much more sinister picture than simple mass suicide. And then there's the mysterious case of the temple members who didn't die at Jonestown, found dead later in Georgetown, seemingly assassinated.
Those Georgetown deaths are particularly chilling. Sharon Amos, a high-ranking temple member, was instructed by Jones to carry out a, quote, revolutionary suicide, along with her 3 children and an elderly temple member at the temple's headquarters in Georgetown. This simultaneous act of violence adds another layer of complexity to the Jonestown narrative. It suggests a level of premeditation and control extending beyond Jonestown itself, reinforcing the idea of a calculated plan rather than a spontaneous act of desperation. The fact that Amos seemingly followed these orders without hesitation, murdering her own children, raises disturbing questions about the level of psychological control Jones exerted over his followers. It's a grim reminder of the power of cults and the potential for horrific acts of violence when blind obedience is coupled with fear and indoctrination.
And what about the rumors of occult practices within the temple? Ex-members have spoken of bizarre rituals, animal sacrifices, and Jones' supposed healing powers, all contributing to an atmosphere of fear and reverence. Were these merely manipulative tactics to solidify his control? Or was there something darker at play? There are accounts of Jones claiming to be the reincarnation of various religious figures, feeding into a messianic complex that blurred the lines between faith and fanaticism. The sheer scale and methodical nature of the Jonestown deaths, coupled with these unsettling accounts, suggest a carefully constructed narrative, a twisted theatrical production with a horrifying climax.
Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Jonestown is not the definitive answers, but the lack thereof. Despite extensive investigations, there remain unanswered questions. The true extent of Jones' control, the level of coercion involved, and the motivations behind the Georgetown deaths are all shrouded in ambiguity. This uncertainty allows for a myriad of theories, some venturing into the realm of the supernatural, fueled by the whispers of occult practices and Jones' messianic delusions. Was Jones driven by a genuine desire to create a utopian society, or was it a power trip fueled by paranoia and a distorted sense of righteousness? The unsettling truth may lie somewhere in between, a complex interplay of psychological manipulation, religious fervor, and a tragic descent into madness, leaving us with a haunting legacy of unanswered questions and a chilling glimpse into the darkest corners of human nature. And perhaps most unsettling of all is the lingering question: could something like this happen again?
It's hard to fathom the sheer scale of it. Over 900 people, including over 300 children, dead in a remote jungle settlement. The audio recordings recovered from Jonestown are chilling. You can hear the blind faith, the desperation, and then the rising panic as the reality of the situation sets in. Jones's voice, amplified over loudspeakers, weaving a narrative of revolutionary suicide, a warped escape from the perceived evils of the outside world. The methodical mixing and distribution of the cyanide-laced flavor aid, parents administering it to their children, the cries, the groans. It paints a horrific picture of mass manipulation and the devastating power of a charismatic leader. Even now, decades later, the true motive remains somewhat elusive. Was it a carefully planned act of mass suicide, a mass murder orchestrated by Jones, or a combination of both, fueled by paranoia, delusion, and a twisted sense of utopian idealism? The Jonestown Massacre remains a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked power and the vulnerability of those seeking belonging and meaning.
It's a chilling example of how quickly things can escalate within a closed group. The isolation of Jonestown, geographically and ideologically, created an echo chamber where dissent was silenced, and Jones's warped worldview became the only reality. The reports of public punishments, sleep deprivation, and constant surveillance paint a picture of a community living in constant fear. Then there's the talk of occult practices within the temple. While hard evidence is scarce, former members have spoken of bizarre rituals and Jones's claims of supernatural abilities, further solidifying his control over his followers. This blend of fear, isolation, and manipulation created the perfect storm for tragedy. It begs the question: how many other Jonestowns are out there, hidden from view, waiting to erupt? The human capacity for both great good and unimaginable evil is truly terrifying.
And that's the truly unsettling thought that lingers. The Jonestown Massacre isn't just a historical event. It's a dark reflection of human psychology and the potential for manipulation and control. The eerie silence that now hangs over the site serves as a chilling reminder of the lives lost and the unanswered questions that remain. The echoes of Jones's voice, the cries of the dying, the ghosts of a community self-destructed. It's a haunting legacy that continues to resonate, whispering a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind faith and the fragility of the human spirit.
Indeed. The whispers of Jonestown serve as a stark reminder to question, to think critically, and to be wary of those who offer easy answers to complex problems. The darkness that descended upon that remote jungle settlement remains a chilling testament to the horrors that can unfold when power goes unchecked. The story of Jonestown is a tragedy that should never be forgotten, a cautionary tale whispered into the darkness, reminding us to be vigilant and to protect ourselves from the shadows that lurk within the human heart. And if you listen closely, perhaps you can still hear them, the faint cries in the jungle, the whispers of Jonestown.
That was this week's dive into darkness. Subscribe to the 18 Plus Horror Podcast and come back if you can sleep again.
You've been listening to Whispers After Midnight. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.